Hi everyone, Steve from Forged here. What I want to do today is to delve into a little bit of the strategy of the game. I'll start with the lemming strategies. So the first thing to keep in mind is when you're deciding where to place your den tile or your burrow tile. I personally like to choose one of the three spots where there are face down tiles directly in front of it so that you can make a quick getaway back to your den after you've gathered the resources you need. Whereas if you start here and you're trying to stay hidden from the foxes, you always have to go kind of one extra space. But maybe there's an argument to be made that if you go in the middle, then you can kind of get there a little bit quicker from either way if you're blocked off one way. So my personal strategy right now is to go right in the middle with my den or my burrow. The other part of your strategy at the start is choosing where to place the Carrion Beetle and the polar bear paw print token. The Carrion Beetle token is bad for you and good for the fox players, so I like to hide it somewhere where it's less likely the fox players are going to search, especially at the start of the game. So I like to place it somewhere in one of these two corners. But again, if you're playing against the same opponent and they know that you like to place it there, then you might have to start changing where you place it. Maybe another strategy could be placing it behind the polar bear token so that it's kind of protected by the polar bear token. So I'm going to place it there. For the polar bear paw print token, I like to place it right in the middle because if it gets flipped up, especially near the start of the game, then the polar bear already has quite a large range to work with. Or you can place it kind of here as well, closer to the foxes, so that even with a poor roll, they're likely to kind of turn it up. I am going to place it here for this game. Then for setup for the foxes. Generally, again, I like to place the den tile in the middle, but an argument could be made for placing it in other places as the strategy evolves. The reason why I like the middle is that it gives you the most movement freedom right at the start. Even with poor rolls, you can still kind of start getting to some of these tiles and listening down them. It's better to start here than to start in one of these tiles with the ones that are already face up, because it's good to listen down spaces that have a lot of tiles flipped face down, because the lemmings are more likely to be there, obviously. So at the start of the game, if you can listen right away, then right away you can eliminate one of the files that the lemming might be down. So if they're not there, then you know, okay, they're probably coming up one of these two files here. Whereas if you're here, you have to move first before you can do any of that. So we'll just say that I place here to begin with. And then for placing the food and water, I like to place them on the same side so that I can kind of protect that side from the lemmings more closely. So if I place them here, then I know that the lemmings will have to, and I can get a fox here, I know the lemmings kind of have to come through me in order to get to where they need to go. And then I might put the adaptations here. So that way, if you have to choose between listening down this file and this file, or this file and this file, you choose these two files so that you can protect the food and water more carefully. Okay, during the game itself, for the beginning turn, for lemmings, you shouldn't be afraid of the zero move action, because what that does is it keeps your lemming safe in the den while one other lemming is kind of going out to try to find the food and water, so you're minimizing your risk of getting caught. And the other good thing is that you can kind of try to lure the foxes to finding the polar bear paw print token, so it kind of sets a trap for them. So in this case, if I hide here, and the first turn the foxes listen down here, and I tell them that yes, there is a lemming there, then that is going to tell them that they're going to want to search in those areas. So they know I'm under one of these 4 tiles. Even with the roll of 4, they search under the burrow tile. It is kind of bad they find the burrow, but the lemming is still safe and not out of the game. And also, with any roll lower than a 4, they run the risk now of turning, basically a 1 in 3 chance of turning over the paw print token. So that happens, and then you instantly gain an advantage in the game of having the polar bear working for you as well as a lemming player. So foxes kind of need to be aware of this and be cautious about these middle tiles and try to think kind of where the other player might have hidden the polar bear paw print token. But again, as your strategy evolves, if you're playing against the same person, then they're going to know you use that strategy and try a different strategy, maybe putting the polar bear somewhere else that you don't suspect. The other thing for foxes is that you want to try to find the Carrion Beetle token. So if you know the lemming player doesn't want you to find it, and you can kind of guess that it might be somewhere in one of these 2 corners, you can try to start searching for that if you have a large move, although it does take you away from protecting the food and water, so you have to keep kind of that a balance. But as soon as you find that Carrion Beetle token, then you gain the advantage on the board. Lemming players, you really don't want to lose 1 lemming, because as soon as you lose 1 lemming, it becomes a lot more difficult to win the game. If you do lose 1 lemming, then try to get those adaptations to protect your last lemming. There's arguments to be made for using a strategy called like muddling the board, kind of where you build lots of tunnels in the danger zone. It increases, so with a roll of 4, like you can move like 1, 2, 3, 4, like move around, kind of flip over these tiles, so that it's increasing kind of the number of tiles that you're safe hiding under. The fox doesn't necessarily know where you're moving around. So you can use that strategy, or you can use the strategy where you turn as little tiles over as possible so that the fox kind of never has any idea where you are. So you kind of use the main files as much as possible, and only if necessary turn over the tiles that are in the face-up position, if like a fox is blocking you and you need to move around them or something. Foxes, on that same note, you want to start to, well, it's key as a fox player to memorize the board before you close your eyes for the lemming turn, to remember which tiles are face down and which tiles are face up, because that gives you a really big hint as to where the lemmings are hiding and where they've moved through. So if you know kind of an area where a lemming has been through, then you can use your listen actions to kind of try to pinpoint that. The other thing is to flip over tiles that are pathways for the lemmings. So these 3 at the start of the game are the main pathways for the lemmings. So if you can get your foxes on these tiles, flipping them over, and you can even get to a point where you maybe have something like this. The only option the lemming has to remain unseen is to come down this way. And if you have a fox there, you're blocking that option as well, so they're going to have to turn over some tiles, and as soon as they do, that gives you an idea of where they are. The other important thing with foxes that I can't stress enough is interchanging your actions. So don't just do listen and move with each fox. What you want to do is have them coordinate together to try to capture the lemming. So you can kind of use their listen and move actions to triangulate, or use their listen actions to triangulate where the lemming is exactly, to increase your chances of finding it. So for instance, if I listen down this line here, and there's a lemming there, I could then position this fox to listen down maybe this way, so that I can eliminate this tile. If there's a lemming there, that's great. I know the lemming is right there. If the lemming's not there, then I've decreased the number of spots I have to check by 25%. So then there is a 1 in 3 chance instead of, I don't know if that makes sense. But there basically goes from 1 to 4, 1 in 4 chance to 1 in 3 chance. So it goes from 25% to 33%. So you're increasing your chances. The other thing to do is if you listen, maneuver him and listen, or if you can like move first, so I could somehow flip this over first and then listen, then you've even narrowed it down even to 50-50. If you listen then here, and then you know that there's a lemming either here or here. So it helps to increase your odds. The other thing is to try to listen down spots that have as many tiles face down as possible. So at the start of the game, I was listening down these 3 spots is a good choice because you're listening down 4 tiles. Instead of like if I'm here and I listen this way, I'm only listening under 1 tile. Sometimes, you know, you just want to know that 1 tile, but most of the time it's more advantageous to know more tiles than just 1. So instead, you know, listening this direction is more helpful because then there's 3 possible spots the lemming could be. So yeah, these files are always good to listen down, and then like positioning your fox in the corners and listening down, or like if more of these are flipped over, listening down here. It's more helpful, it gives you more information than listening down a spot that only has a couple tiles. Lemming players, a good strategy is not to be on a tile where the fox could immediately listen and find you at the end of your movement. So for instance, I wouldn't really want to be here, or especially not here, unless I'm setting a trap for the foxes, because they can listen and find you without having to move first. So instead of moving here, I might go here, because that forces the fox at least to move before they can listen for you. And if they choose to just listen first, they're not going to find you. But sometimes as the fox player, I know that the lemming player is trying to do that, so I might move to try to counteract that by moving first and then listening, instead of listening first and moving. When the polar bear is active, unless you're certain of a lemming being under a certain tile, you've got to be really careful as the foxes not to turn over these tiles too much, because the more you turn over, the more range the polar bear gets. And lemming players, you also don't want to flip over too many tiles that are in the face-up position, because then you're starting to limit your polar bear's range. So you also want to be careful of doing that. The polar bear doesn't usually capture the foxes unless the fox is taking a risk. They always know whether they're going to be in the polar bear's range or not, based on like the maximum number. Well, if they get a 4, and if I know I'm 4 squares away, then I know the polar bear could potentially capture me. Obviously, the further away you are from it, the better your chances of not getting caught. So the polar bear only has a 25% chance of catching you if you're 4 squares away from it, or 3 squares away from it. So keeping your distance as much as possible. But you probably are going to have to get a little bit close, because one of the good strategies is the lemming players to use the polar bear as kind of your blocker. So if you have the polar bear kind of right beside you here, and you move up and down these files, this file, anytime the fox player is turning over those tiles, they're running the risk of getting captured by the polar bear. So yeah, it really helps you having that polar bear active. For fox players, with the Carrion Beetle, he is kind of like having a third fox in terms of his ability to block the lemmings from coming down certain files. So if you put him here, then you know that the lemming player is not allowed to move through tiles with an active Carrion Beetle. So you know that the lemming can't come down that way, it has to kind of go around, and will make tracks when it does that you can find. And if you can capture the polar bear, then do it. But the lemming players should be very careful with the polar bear, because the Carrion Beetle essentially has certain tiles that it can never reach. So if the Carrion Beetle is there, for instance, I know if I place the polar bear here, the Carrion Beetle can never get to him. So even like, because of his skip ability, so like if he moves 1, he goes here, or moves 1, he go here, he can't get to that tile. Even if he moves like 1, 2, 3, trying to come back around 4, he can't get there. So there's always going to be 50% of the tiles that the Carrion Beetle can't access. So keeping that in mind as a polar bear can help to not get him captured and removed from the game. In terms of other strategies, yeah, the Lemming players, don't be afraid to let draw out the fox players a little bit before you try to go into their area to capture the food and water. Wait for a good roll to kind of get in there and get out. And then it's basically, once you know where those things are, then you can kind of make your strategy, plan your strategy more accordingly based on where the food and water tokens are hidden and what adaptations you find. Thanks for watching. That concludes this video. If you have any questions, please leave them in the comments below. Also, please follow me on Instagram and Twitter for updates on what's happening next with the game.